Hey everyone, this podcast is part of Story Mode, the podcast network of Gamefully Unemployed. You can support us and gain access to other great exclusive podcasts at patreon.com/gamefullyunemployed. That's patreon.com/GAMEFULLY unemployed, which is spelled like it sounds.
All you motherfuckers are gonna pay. You are the ones who are the ball lickers. We're gonna fuck your mothers while you watch and cry like little whiny bitches. We're gonna make them eat our shit, then shit out our shit, and then eat their shit that's made up of our shit that we made them eat. And then all you motherfuckers are next. Love, Jane, Silent Bob.
There is a possibility, because I have a connection to the Schmodown, and Kevin Smith does the Schmodown. He might see this.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's possible.
I mean, he'll hear it.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah.
He will see that we've done a podcast, and then he might take the additional step to hear the podcast.
Right. Well, I mean, if he's listening right now, call me, baby. That was weird. No, I mean, like, there's going to be some critique here, obviously, but I think this is the show. We've started the show.
The show has begun.
I'm okay with it starting like this.
Yeah, that's fine.
We'll get to... I just want to finish this.
Yeah.
I think we both kind of grew up on his movies, so any critique is coming from a place of ultimately, like, love for...
100%. Yeah.
For better or for worse, he's made the person I am.
From 7th grade on. Yes. Absolutely. Yeah. Kevin Smith, and then a couple of years later, Trey Parker and Matt Stone were like the big reasons why I wanted to get into comedy and writing comedy and making like comedy movies and stuff.
Right, folks. This is Old Smith, New Smith. This is this is a podcast where myself and Tom. Hi, I'm David Bell.
Hi, I'm Tom Ryman.
There, we got that out of the way. We got a couple more things to do, but first, this is a podcast where we're going to match up a old Kevin Smith movie with a new Kevin Smith movie. And in fact, what we're going to do is, as you can see from the title of this one, which is Clerks / Jay and Silent Bob Reboot, we're going to take like the newest and the oldest, and we're going to keep moving inward from that.
Yeah, sort of like they're mirror opposites. Were you to split the filmography of Kevin Smith along, I guess the timeline would be it would be split at Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, right? So like everything after Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back is on the right side, which would be New Smith, and then everything before is on the left side, which is Old Smith, and you just kind of line them up.
And we're gonna cover pretty much every movie, not every movie. But we're gonna kind of like put them side to side and arbitrarily, might I add, because it's not like this is a way to judge anything. We're gonna see how the two match up thematically and in terms of the skill and so on and so forth. This is brought to you by @NerdNumbers. That is our Patreon producer. @NerdNumbers.
I'm assuming nerd numbers are just numbers that wear glasses.
Yes, me too. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we can bully these
doing
fucking
math.
Geek numbers.
You're dunking these numbers in the toilet.
Yeah, God, yeah.
Write my paper for me, nerd number. I'm gonna kick you in the decimal point so hard.
Yeah, thank you, Nerd Numbers. This is one of those times where like they came to us and they're like, "I want this," and it's like, "I want that too." That actually seems like a really fun podcast.
Most of the Patreon produced series we've done have been like that for me anyway.
Yeah,
where it's
for sure.
Our lovely, delightful patrons come to us and be like, "Hey, I want to buy this tier and I want to make this show," and we're most of the time we've been like, "Yeah, we want to make this show too."
Oh, absolutely. This is probably just the one that's most like, oh yeah, I can talk about Kevin Smith movies.
Right, like I hardly need to rewatch them. I've seen them so many times. The older ones.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that.
We will talk about that because that's another thing. Well, let's talk about that right now. Is I think both of us, his old films we've watched a lot more than his new films. And that isn't really a judgment on his new films. It's just when you're young and you like a film, you watch it like 50 times. That's just a thing, right?
As you're forming your personality, because I discovered Kevin Smith in 7th grade. The first thing I saw was Mallrats, and it was in '95, but I didn't see it in the theater. So it's when you're like middle school, high school, and you're still forming your personality. Your personality is just entirely the stuff you like what things you like. That's your personality. So, yeah, I watched Clerks, Mallrats, Chasing Amy, Dogma when it came out. But Clerks and Mallrats definitely the most, just because it was on the earlier half of the 90s. Anyway, it's...
Yeah, I watched the VHS of it.
Yeah, you watch them over and over and over again, and sort of you start to mold your personality around the things that you like, because that's what teenagers do.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's kind of why I clung more to Kevin Smith's earlier stuff. And when he, after Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, he started to make more adventurous movies, at least for him. Like he was going outside of the typical View Askew universe, what people knew him for.
Yeah, it felt like he multiple times he sort of and often literally closed the book on the View Askew-averse.
View Askew-averse.
Sure. And so like it was clear he was kind of being more experimental later. Mm-hmm. Stuff like Red State. He dabbled with like more mainstream stuff too.
Yeah, Cop Out and Jersey Girl.
Yeah, exactly. And so, yeah, it really does have to do a lot with the age we were. Mm-hmm. Like, that's the one thing I always say about Kevin Smith movies, is it's often, it's kind of like a lot of comedy where it's like you kind of had to be there. And it's, if someone watches his movies now and they're like, they're really dated, how could you like it? And it's like, no, I can't really, like, I can't defend something that's like watching the movie we're pairing this up with, Clerks, the Jay and Silent Bob reboot, is like that movie. I watched it once, and as a movie, it's filled with so many fan references, and it's so meta that it doesn't function as a movie, and we'll certainly get to that. But you know what I mean, where this early stuff functions a lot more as movies.
Yeah.
And
it's a story instead of a series of self-referential jokes.
Exactly. They're still of their time, though. And so, like, I don't know how young people perceive Kevin Smith. I think he's a divisive filmmaker, probably because, again, you either were shaped by his work or you weren't.
A lot of people, I would dare say a lot of people our age were probably shaped by his work, at least in some respect, which you can tell by just looking at like the early stages of internet comedy. Like we both wrote for Cracked, and a lot of Cracked can be seen in Kevin Smith's movies. If you watch it now, it seems like overly verbose, deconstructive pop culture arguments. That was like really new when Kevin Smith was doing it. Like he was the one that was doing it. Like there wasn't really the internet at this point, at least not anywhere near what it is right now.
I think the stuff that dates him is the stuff that dates people like Tarantino, and it's in the dialogue often.
Yeah.
Where it is like, it's like, geez, the 90s indie films.
Yeah.
But yeah, exactly 29 minutes into this movie, Clerks. So we can sort of start talking about Clerks a little bit, but I'm sure we're going to be talking about Smith in general for this first episode, at least. That's a moment that changed me. And it's when they talk about the contractors. The Death Star. Because that was the first time in my teenage years that I realized, like, oh, other people just talk about movies like that. And you can use movies as, like, a medium for being nitpicky for the sake of comedy. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And that was basically what Clerks, what Cracked was.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about movies, and it doesn't really matter. It's just a medium, a vessel to tell jokes.
Right. It's you find something that creates a funny situation when you think about it. When you think about it, it's something in terms of like a narrative. It's always moving forward, right? So like things will happen, and you'll just leave it behind because the story needs to keep moving. The protagonists need to keep going forward towards the end of the story. But like this was kind of the first time where you saw something like this on a really large scale that was glomming on to one of those moments that are meant to be forgettable. You're not meant to dwell on them. And then just really dwelling on it specifically for the purpose of making jokes, not to bring the movie down, but to like, who was working on the Death Star? Were there daycare centers on the Death Star? Because these families, these workers probably had families. There's probably a zoo. Like, I mean, they make that gag in Spaceballs. But like,
but it is. I mean, that's what parody originally was too, which is deconstructing other movies, and like ultimately, it doesn't matter. It's all fictional, and treating it with that passion. And so I think Kevin Smith, like, there was a lot of this era of like slacker comedy, right?
Yes.
What Kevin Smith did, and what I think made him stand out, is that he was doing like nerd slacker comedy. He was doing Star Wars. He was doing, and this was back when, talking about Star Wars was actually a nerdy thing.
Like, right. There was not. Friend of the pod, Jeff May. Jeff has a bit. He has a bit in his routine where he talks about being a Star Wars fan at this time, and he was like, "It was not a good. It's not like it was today, where you can walk into Target and get a Star Wars shirt. Like, it was not cool to like Star Wars in 1993. Yeah. There hadn't been a movie in 10 years.
Right.
Like
pop
culture. Like, yeah. He would say it's like being a Matrix fan in like 2012.
Yeah.
Like, it's just
it's not cool. No one's like, oh yeah. Now pop culture is just, it is, it is in control. Stuff like comic books and Star Wars, but it wasn't when this shit was being made.
No.
So there's I think that's a part of. I think it's going to be interesting watching his later films with that in mind, because I think about like Chasing Amy has a convention scene, and it's like a little shitty convention, and I believe Jay and Silent Bob Reboot also has a convention scene, and it's a big ass convention.
Yeah,
because that's how it would be now. So the point is that like he was able to harness the slacker comedy, and then also the idea that was very relatable, which was like, not only like you're sitting around, you're working a job, but you're also shooting the shit about bullshit. Yeah. And he honed in on, it's often, like I worked at a movie theater, I worked at a diner, I worked slacker jobs in my 20s where we would sit around and talk about bullshit.
Yeah, that's all we did.
Yeah. And it was often like just analyzing movies for dumb reasons.
Yeah, because what else are you going to talk about? It's you don't have any. Normally, you're not working with people you know, which is it's different in Clerks because Dante and Randall know each other and they know everybody. It's a small community, but like most of the time, you don't know the people you're working with, so you connect on just what movies you watch, and you just start bullshitting about movies.
Yeah, like, exactly. So yeah, it's a big influence, along with a lot of other, because there was also the filmmaking influence, which I don't know if it's the same for everybody, but like I grew up on this and Evil Dead, and a lot of that was like, not only do I like these movies, but the filmmaking side, wow, they spent this much money and they were able to make a movie that succeeded.
Yeah.
That's wild. He's strapping microphones on hockey sticks and holding them up like boom mics. That's so cool,
Yeah. It was I found punk rock at around the same time, and it had the same effect on me, where it was like watching movies like this and Evil Dead 2 and like listening to punk rock, and it's like I could do this. Like that was the other major formative part of this for sure, is the realization that I could. It wasn't like this far off, unattainable thing. It's like, no, people like a person like me could actually do this.
Right. Like, because Kevin Smith is also the flair is in the writing, which I think is, I don't think he started that. It's like theater. These movies, like watching Clerks, there's so many long oneers.
It's blocked like a play, yeah.
Yeah, and it really works. There's some stuff in this movie that really works. Like, I thought the editing really worked often. And so, but it's very straightforward most of the time, and it's just these flat setups, people like on sticks, and just people like, like you said, it's like a play. And it's just, we're just focused on the writing. We're just focused on the dialogue. It's all about the dialogue.
Yeah.
Not much happens in this movie. That said, enough happens. It's formed like a narrative. Like he dropped out of film school, but he knew how to tell a story too.
Yeah.
So the things happen when they need to happen.
And I think wasn't he in a sketch troupe with his friends at school or something? Like
I don't know.
He wrote a lot of sketches leading up to this.
Yeah. So it's a series of conversations that are unrelated with a narrative throughout that keeps it cohesive, and a character arc, several character arcs. So I don't know. It's one of those where you go back and watch it, and you're like, oh yeah, I see why this killed it. I see why this started his career. That said, I hadn't watched this movie in a while, Tom.
Mm-hmm.
Mainly not for any reason, but like for the same reason I haven't watched like Back to the Future in a while, because the movie exists in my brain.
Yeah, it's just forever in my brain.
Yeah.
Like, I've seen it so many times. It's like Jaws almost.
Yeah.
Although I rewatch Jaws all the time, but it's like I hardly need to. I can close my eyes and just play the entire film.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, because I watched it so much.
Yeah.
That it's like, yeah, it's there. It's seared into me.
Mm-hmm.
So, had you watched this movie recently?
No, it's probably been 10 years since I've watched this movie.
Oh, okay.
It's been a long
about
time.
the same.
Yeah.
And again, for clarity, we're doing Clerks this round. For
Yes.
the next episode, we'll do the Jay and Silent Bob reboot, which, Tom, I believe you haven't seen.
I have not seen it yet.
Yeah, I only saw it once, and I don't. It's been long enough that it's like it's next time I watch it, it's gonna feel new. So I'm excited for that. Rewatching Clerks. I guess I want to start with what is dated.
Well,
the obvious one being the title cards.
Yeah, the title cards, and that's an artifact of if everybody. I'm sure everybody listening to this podcast is probably a Kevin Smith fan or has at least seen Clerks. So a lot of you probably already know this.
Or is Kevin Smith.
Or you might be Kevin Smith.
And I think Kevin Smith would agree the title cards are pretty dated.
It's a dated art school thing. Yeah. And it was born of his initial idea from what he's talked about in commentaries and interviews about the film, where it was supposed to kind of, like, the initial idea was to sort of mimic Dante's journey through Inferno.
Right.
Which is why the character's called Dante.
Right.
And then it was going to end with him getting shot and killed in the end. And that's the
right,
end. I'm sure most of you guys know this, but the original ending was Dante getting shot.
Yeah, it's he throws the thing because we were closed, and then Dante walks away, and then he goes behind the counter, and he starts closing, and they do this really film schooly thing where the guy comes in, close up of Dante's eyes, he's shot in the stomach, dies slowly, and then the movie ends. And I forget who it was. Kevin Smith has talked about it. Like, this guy saved his ass. Some producer was like, "You need to cut that. That needs to be cut."
And it's just it's an artifact of that art school thing where it's like, because this movie, we're going to talk about the themes of this and how it relates to the movie we've paired it with, which I think it's a lot of ennui, obviously, right? Like, it's, my life's going nowhere. I what's my purpose?
I think there's going to be a lot of coming of age comparisons.
Mm-hmm.
Just having seen the Jay and Silent Bob reboot, I will say it's about Jay's daughter. Rather, Jay discovering he has a daughter, I believe.
Okay.
And so there's like the dynamic that I always forget about in this movie, Clerks, is there is a like Gen X versus Boomer dynamic.
Yeah.
Where the customers are these fucking boomers who are so entitled, and they're like, and they, well, rather they're framed as being entitled.
Yeah.
And then Randall's arc is actually like, what makes me better than them? Like, why am I treating them like this? And so like that is like, that is the whole thing. It's the slacker thing. It's the no direction. It's what Clerks 2 is also about.
Yeah.
It's about being at a time in your life and feeling like you're stalled.
Yeah, yeah. And so that's like, this movie was initially a meditation that was really melodramatic, where it was like, obviously Dante is supposed to be Kevin Smith himself because he worked at this convenience store.
Right.
And it was like, oh, I'm stuck in this place. If I stay stuck in this place for too long, I'm going to die. Right. At least that's my reading of that. But so like a lot of it seems, with that ending cut, the title cards really seem strange.
Yeah. And with that ending, it's such a, that's the thing, is that as a coming of age story and as like being stuck, but there's hope, that's how you end it. Mm-hmm. You end it with, and then the day continues. We're closed, throwing the thing. Like, it's such a natural ending that it's so bizarre.
It's so obvious
to have him shot.
It's one of those things, you know. We talk about it a lot. Like, I know you and Jason have brought it up before on the why blockbusters bore, and we've talked about it on other things. But like, you know, in The Sixth Sense, Bruce Willis wasn't a ghost until like the fourth or fifth draft. Like,
right.
Sometimes you don't see the forest for the trees right away.
Also, it's one of the things you learn post-production at least I learned in film school, was and I'm sure this applies to a lot of art. Oh, this applies to writing for sure.
Yeah.
Is like, it's the kill your babies thing. It's sometimes if there was a shot that you're like, man, we worked so hard, it took all day to get that shot, and you're in the editing room and you're like, you have to accept sometimes, like, I have to cut that shot.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes it's just like, it's not working. I'm going to cut it. I can't think about how much work it took.
Yeah. It's the kill your darlings phrase, if you've heard that.
Yeah.
Sometimes it just doesn't become I can imagine watching the original cut of the film and being like, when Randall throws the sign at him and says you're closed, like, that's the clear. Like, that must have just, when you're watching,
it's so perfect.
Yeah, you're just, oh well, that's the ending right there.
Yeah.
Like, the ending of him dying is such a weird. Right. Yeah. It may have always made sense in his head while he was writing it, but that's not the movie he wrote.
Right. And it's like, he's, in a way, he was lucky that it was so modular, where like the you're closed scene is like, all the arcs are completed.
Yeah.
And it would have been a real bummer if like the later ending had some of that. It like bled into it. You know what I mean? And it's like, it was like,
and it wasn't just a simple editing thing to cut it.
Yeah, because all you do is you just cut the end. That's it.
That's it.
Yeah, so the general, I guess, for people who haven't seen Clerks, it's again, old school indie idea, which is the whole movie is just about one day. And it's about, a clerk getting up. He's not supposed to work that day. The boss calls him in. And it's about, he's supposed to leave at noon, and the boss ends up being in like Vermont.
He goes to Vermont for no reason, I don't know for no reason, but he doesn't tell Dante he's going to Vermont.
Yeah. So it's essentially a series of vignettes with them and customers, or Dante, and then the video store next door run by Randall, his friend, who is, he's like the fuck up. He's the bad influence.
He's the id. He's everybody who's worked a service job like this dreams of doing what Randall does.
Right. He's also immediately right. He's the antagonist, by the way. Like, he's the person who all causes the conflicts. Yeah. But he immediately, because we learn pretty quickly that Dante is torn between Veronica, his current girlfriend, and Caitlin, his high school girlfriend. And Dante sort of has this attitude where everything happens to him. They also very quickly, I noticed, established that Dante is a very capable person. Like he
he opens up the shop, no problem.
He opens up the shop. He's clearly done this a million times. He should be manager. He's doing stuff like he's shit. He calls the locksmith about the locks. Like he's trying to. So he's irritated, and it's clear that he's sort of
he's
could
better
be doing
than this
a lot
job.
more.
Yeah, he's better than this job.
But yeah, immediately Randall's just like, you should pick Veronica. That you got to get over this Caitlin Bree situation.
It's part of the. It's not really a metaphor. Well, I guess it is, but it's part of the idea that Dante is stuck and he's like regressing. Like he's clinging to his high school days, which are represented by Caitlin, and then it's Veronica. The future's uncertain, but she's a good, positive influence. I don't know. She's trying to get him to quit the convenience store and go back to school.
Right.
Like he has the means to move forward in front of his face, but he's just kind of this. He's dragging his feet like he's a slacker. It's a slacker movie.
Right. And this is, by the way, all introduced in about 14 minutes of the film, which I thought was very well done. And Randall shows up about 18 minutes in. By about 20 minutes in, it's clear
we know everything.
Yeah. Which isn't like revolutionary, but it's just he does a good job with that.
It's remarkably efficient for a first feature from somebody with like no filmmaking background, really.
Right. And then, again, Randall keeps kind of saying the truth. He's just such a shitty friend that it's kind of hot hidden in there. Like when he spits on the guy and he's like, I'm the master of my own destiny. Like he's not wrong.
It's stuff that Dante needs to hear.
Yeah.
Because again, like what you said, he has the everything happens to me attitude. It's like, well, you can take action. Like you can do stuff. You don't have to sit here just because you can leave this job. There's
also, of course, a thread where he is decided to be mad at Veronica for what's frankly very like prudish and childish reasons, which is the fact that she sucked 37 dicks.
Yeah,
look,
it's intentional, right? Because it comes right after he takes he admits. He tells Veronica that he's slept with 12 women and she smacks him. He's like, what are you doing? And it's like, that's an extreme reaction to have. Like who are you?
Right.
But then he's immediately 11 times more judgmental when he hears how many people she's been with.
I feel like it gets lost in the meme of 37.
37, yeah.
Yeah. Because it does have one of my favorite punchlines where he says to a random customer, 37, my girlfriend sucked 37 dicks, and the guy says, in a row?
My favorite thing about that is the guy's delivery coupled with the fact that he's buying a king-size package of Pampers.
Yes. Some of the customers, and they're all the same three people.
Right. And I know it's intentional.
It's David Klein, the cinematographer, Walt Flanagan, and Scott Mosier.
Yeah.
What were you gonna say?
I was gonna say they're all. I think Kevin Smith points it out in the commentary, but if you watch, they're all buying like crazy things.
Yeah. The first I'd never noticed this one before is that when Silent Bob comes in, he buys a thing of sugar, and it's like, what the fuck does he need that sugar for?
It doesn't.
That was the one that I hadn't noticed before. God, yeah. There's and then of course there's the try not to suck any dicks on the way to the parking lot.
Yeah.
Hey, you get back here.
Yeah, it does get lost in the gags of the scene. But yeah, the point is he's the asshole. He's wrong, and it's like this idea of him still being childish. It's like what does it matter? And then like Randall's giving him shit for it. And her, he's teasing her about it, but like we learned that Randall told him, like she's like, you had to tell Randall, and he was like, well, I had to tell somebody, and she's like, and what did he say? He said, and then Dante's like, well, he said it doesn't matter, they're all dudes I'm never gonna meet anyway, so what do I care?
First he said at least he wasn't 36.
Yeah, at least I wasn't 36.
Yeah. I would say I don't think it gets lost to the jokes. I think it got lost to time.
Yeah.
Because there's like lines where he says, why couldn't you just sleep with him like any other decent person?
Right. It's like, what?
Yeah. about Snowball, played by Scott Mosier. Killing it as Snowball. Snowball's a character where it's like, oh, I've met like 4 Snowballs.
Yeah, I've hung out with Snowball before.
People who are just so burnt out.
I love the scene where who's the guy that throws the hockey ball away? Isn't that also
That's Scott Mosier?
I was going to say, isn't that also Mosier?
Shaved. Yeah, they just shaved it. It's like The Evil Dead, where like Ted Raimi shows up all the time.
Yeah,
it's Scott Mosier, Walt Flanagan, and David Klein. Those are, I believe, the 3 that are like they just constantly. They're the fake shimps. Yeah, they just show up when they need a dude.
Yeah, they usually shot from behind, wearing a hat or their hair combed a different way.
Yeah, I think Walt Flanagan is like, he's like the first guy who asked for the cigarettes.
He's the egg guy. He's the guy that gets offended when they're talking about nudie booths.
Yeah. The Scott Mosier's, definitely Snowball, definitely that guy. I think he's got a few more. I know David Klein, I believe, is the Pringles guy, which was
he's just doing Bill Murray from Caddyshack. Scene. I didn't notice that until this watch. I was just going to point out in the scene where they're up on the roof playing hockey, and Snowball and some other random customer show up and ask if they're open, and they lean down and shout no. And it cuts back to them, and it's the stupidest joke, but Snowball just hauls ass in a random direction.
Snowball, all right, like I get they set up Jay and Silent. It's like the craziest thing, because we haven't even talked about Jay and Silent Bob, and the craziest thing is they show up 7 minutes in, they're introduced with a title, and it's almost like Kevin Smith knew, like, these are the characters, like, these are the characters that are going to continue more than anybody else. And we definitely should talk about the arc of what happens to Jay and Silent Bob, because they essentially are cartoon characters. They are literally cartoon characters later. But Jay and Silent Bob have become, they're Cheech and Chong. And this is them at their grittiest.
Yeah.
And it's not that much different. I would say the use of homophobic slurs, very dated.
Yeah.
But the character of Jay, it's like, yep. I've also met that person.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Jay is less of a lovable character.
He's more of the dude, and I think I read it was either this movie or Mallrats where like this cast was afraid of him.
It was probably Mallrats. I know they were trying to recast him.
They tried to recast him with Breckin Meyer in Mallrats. I'm sure we'll talk about that in Mallrats.
Yeah, and Seth Green was considered. There was a few people.
He's one of those dudes that it's most apparent in Clerks. Yeah, you're right. It's not the lovable character. A bunch of us have probably, like, I've definitely hung out with this guy before too. This guy is scary in real life.
Yeah,
he's funny, but he's also like you wouldn't want to hang out with him by yourself.
Right. It feels like he would go to jail for a dirtbag crime later.
Right. He's like a really intense dirtbag. He's funny, but like he's way more of a dirtbag in this one.
Right. That said, there is something to say about that arc, because I knew people who were like, when we were teenagers, was like, that's the drug dealer. You get drugs from him. And then I got to know them later in life, and it occurred to me like, oh, they're putting on an act.
Yeah.
And I became friends with them later, and they were very sweet people. So you could argue that about him. And the true story behind Jason Mewes is that Kevin Smith, he's not an actor. Kevin Smith found him. He was actually really bashful. I know the dancing scenes he refused to do in front of a crew. He was like too embarrassed. So Kevin Smith had to like set up a camera and was just like, it's just me and you, buddy.
Yeah.
So like,
yeah,
he's a caricature, of something that he sort of was at the time. And of course, there's a whole arc to Jason Mewes and drug addiction and getting over that, and that's sort of what we'll explore, I think, in the reboot.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this is definitely the grittiest version.
Yeah, this is the most intense Jay has been, and he's still like a likable character. It's just he's intense in this one.
Yeah, he's likable. It's the same as like Randall, where like they're not supposed to be people you want to hang out with. They're likable in the sense of
they're
you're
entertaining
watching,
as movie
they're
characters.
entertainment. Yeah, exactly. That's the way to put it.
You would keep your distance from a guy like Jay, and then Randall would be just a constant pain in the ass. He is just chaotic. He just does things. He makes decisions for Dante and then just does them.
Yeah. The thing that gets forgotten from this movie is that Jay and Silent Bob aren't the only scumbags. Snowball, obviously, but also like that weird Jersey chick with Olaf. Who has also one of my favorite fucking lines, which is, "Did he say making fuck?"
I love that. I love that actress and that scene.
She's so good.
That whole scene is incredible.
Yeah. His band called Fuck Your Yankee Blue
Fuck
Jeans
Your Yankee
or some
Blue
shit.
Jeans or some shit.
And they're like, what do you say? I don't know, but this guy's a character.
No, this guy's a character.
Olaf is fucking amazing.
Shit.
God, another character that I always forget about that actually really plays into the editing is the cat.
Yeah.
One of my favorite editing beats is later because, we don't really need to go through the story, right?
No, it's Dante bitching and moaning about how everything terrible happens to him, and he doesn't realize that he's the engineer of his own suffering.
Right.
Or the architect of his own suffering, rather. So he basically ends up fucking up two relationships.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The inciting incident is he learns Caitlin Bree is going to get married in the newspaper, and then she shows up. It's almost the reverse of Clerks 2, where she's like going to get married, and then they decide to form a relationship again, and it's like very clear that he's going down the wrong path, and then sort of fate intervenes when Caitlin Bree fucks a dead guy in the bathroom.
Randall also tells Veronica about it.
Yes. Well, that happens next. Caitlin fucks a dead guy.
Yeah.
Snowball goes in the ambulance with her.
He sure does.
That was very funny.
He sure does.
And that's like the third act. That's like the down.
It's like the darkest part of the movie. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they don't. It's funny. Like the idea of it's kind of funny, but they treat it. I always forget kind of how seriously they treat it.
Yeah, because it's a serious thing to happen.
It's a serious thing, right? On paper, you could, and in the fact that it's in a Kevin Smith movie, you could see like a gag like that being like just an over the top joke you'd see in The Hangover, or something. You know,
it's set up by an old guy comes in and he has to use the bathroom.
That's an incredible sequence.
I was about to say he kills
that guy rules.
He's so good. And he slowly, and it's showing that Dante is a pushover, and it kind of, again, he creates his own problems ultimately. Not that he would have known this was going to happen.
No.
But he's like, "Can I use your bathroom?" And he's like, "It's not for customers, but sure." He's like, "Can I have something to read?" And
he asked for toilet paper, but yeah, it's an escalation.
Yeah. And he asked for the porno mags, and he's like, "Fine."
But then he wants a specific one.
Yeah. They got bigger titties in there.
Bigger titties in that. Like he talks.
Yeah. He's. Oh, it's amazing.
Yeah, he's got the old. He sounds like Zoidberg. He's got the old New York rabbi voice.
Yeah, exactly. He's so good.
Yeah, kills it.
We just forget about him for the film.
Yeah,
and then
Caitlin. It's actually a good. It's
setup.
It's a good setup because we do legitimately forget about him.
Yeah, and then there's a part about the lights don't work in the bathroom, and the beautiful thing about the way the dialogue works is that he can sneak exposition by just having it part of a larger conversation.
Right.
So like they have a whole conversation about that, and it just feels like anything else. And then she thinks it's Dante, and she fucks this dead guy, and she's traumatized. Like,
yeah, they treat her reaction. It's very serious. They treat it very seriously. Surprisingly,
They do it seriously, or rather, the characters do
it seriously, and then they wheel out a corpse
funny.
who's pitching a giant tent.
Yeah, and she has the line of like, "I didn't just fuck myself."
Yeah,
when they're like, "It wasn't me."
Yeah.
And so it takes her out of the movie, but it doesn't solve the problem. And then Randall is like, you need to shit or get off the pot. You need to do something. And he realizes Dante's not going to do it for himself. So he goes and breaks up with Veronica for him while Dante realizes that he's in love with Veronica because Silent Bob shows up and gives him there's plenty of fine-looking women out there, but most of them won't bring you lasagna at work or whatever.
Yeah.
He says most of them will just cheat on you. And so, like, this encapsulates Randall in almost every movie he's in, or, well, in Clerks 2 as well, which is that he has the right idea, but the execution is terrible.
Yeah.
Like, he's always the person who knows what Dante needs. He doesn't know how to give it to him, and he tries and always fails. So he fucks it up for Dante, and then they fight. It's like the climax. And that's where, by the way, my favorite editing move is the cat reaction shots to that.
Yeah.
And I love also close-up of Randall's hand grabbing a piece of bread. Close-up of Dante's face getting hit with bread.
Yep.
And it's like so ineffective.
Yeah, it's like such a weak hit too. It's It's very funny. Yeah. But they set up they also plant the idea that Caitlin has sort of done this before in just a random piece of dialogue.
What, fucked a dead guy?
Well, remember he says she cheated on me 9.5 times.
Oh, right, where she walked into a room with him and it was dark and she assumed it was someone else.
Yep.
You're right. That's really good.
Yep.
Yeah, they did a good job setting that up.
It's in there, baby. Plant and payoff.
Plant and payoff. And again, it's just a very simple
this
conversation.
is basic. This is basic shit. It's just, when you see it in I don't know. It's one of many reasons why you watch this movie and you're like, okay, I see why this gave him a career.
Yeah. No, he's doing all the work. It keeps your attention. It's not just a series of nothing conversations. It goes somewhere.
You have to. I think it's a thing to keep in mind is convincing, because this is a movie that he essentially made with his friends. I think the only professional actors in the movie are Dante and Veronica, I think. They are. It's in black and white. It's a lot of. He's not a terribly dynamic director. He tends to just park the camera. So it's a lot of long stretches of dialogue. It's in black and white. It has no movie stars in it. This is a tough sell for audiences, but the fact that you can sit there and just, like, the movie holds your attention. It's paced really well. The editing does a lot of work. You're absolutely right. Like, it knows when to cut away to something else in the middle of one of these long things, for example. It's, again, very basic stuff, but it knows how to keep the audience from getting bored, because this is a tough offer for a mainstream audience to sit through.
For sure.
A lot of that has to be like it's really impressive that he was able to make such a watchable comedy.
Well,
out of this.
This was an era where we were looking at indie films where Miramax was going
I think this
strong.
was right as Miramax was exploding.
Yeah.
Like, this was one of the ones that made it, right? That made Miramax.
I get why this would be something that people glom onto at festivals and stuff, because of all those things we're talking about, where it's like, it's so charming in its simplicity, but it is an extremely effective film.
Yeah.
And it is easy to forget that.
Yeah.
That the way the film is constructed, it's just about a guy and his friend, and their emotional arcs throughout. But they're there, and they work. And so, yeah, I don't know. I really get it.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. But I mean, it's like, you can tell. It's interesting to go back and watch the first films of a lot of directors who had to kind of cut their teeth on the extreme, and you go back and watch like Blood Simple, and you're like, oh, this is a Coen-ass movie right here. Like, you can see that it's the Coen brothers. And I watched Mike Flanagan's first film, Absentia, which he financed through Kickstarter.
Right.
And it's really rough around the edges, but you watch the movie and you're like, oh, this is a Mike Flanagan ass movie. Like, I can tell that he's gonna be somebody, you know. And you watch Clerks, you get that same. Even though Clerks is really simple, it's just it's very well executed. Yeah,
for sure. And it definitely paints a picture of like where he's heading and the type of movies he's going to make. For the most part, I'm excited to talk about stuff like Red State.
Even Dogma to an extent, even though it's more in this wheelhouse.
I mean, it's hard to make this judgment, but Dogma is probably his best movie.
I would agree with it. It's my favorite.
Yeah, it's the most realized movie. But I want to get into broader themes.
Yeah.
One that stuck out at me that's very, very dated and very Gen X, which is the anti-smoking. There's the cancer merchant guy, but then later he gets fined, and they don't even like ask for evidence. Like they're just like, it's such a straw man, where it's like you sold cigarettes to a child, which Randall did.
Yeah.
But he's just like, you can't contest this in court. We're not even looking for evidence. Like, here it is. Bye.
I mean,
and it's just very funny that there's a little bit of that throughout.
Yeah. I think that that was definitely a Gen X idea that I forgot about. Because it's so close to boomers, like, where it's just the mentality of you can't tell me what's good or bad for me. Like, we're all gonna die someday, you know. Or it's like, why are you trying to, like? I don't know. It is a weird, weirdly. I don't know. It's a weird synergy between Gen
it's
X.
Still funny. It's still funny. I like one of my favorite background character lines is when the guy, the guy drumming up the Chuli's Gum representative is like, he smells the change is coming, and you hear a background guy go, you can smell it.
There's a bunch of fucking heroes in that scene.
Smoke my big fat cock.
Yep, smoke my big fat cock. It's just you don't even see the guy. It's just. Every random line that's being thrown out by that crowd is incredible.
Yeah. Also, probably the most depressing detail of this movie is that cigarettes cost less than $2. If you look at the prices in the background, it's like $1.89. It's like, fuck.
93, man.
93, man.
I assume it was because this movie was released in 94, so I assume it was filmed in 93.
Yeah. And so I think we touched on the bigger thing, which is which is relatable to now, which is having more potential and being stuck in a job that you absolutely hate.
Yeah.
The difference is the conflict in this is that Dante's his own worst enemy.
Yeah.
Whereas nowadays it's more like the economy is the enemy.
It's systemic. Yeah.
Yeah.
So things have only gotten more gate-kept in the intervening 25 years.
Right, but it's still an important idea to talk about, which is this self-fulfilling prophecy Dante is stuck in, where he's not... He feels like the deck is stacked against him, so he's not even trying.
So why try? Yeah.
Yeah. And they're both versions of nihilism, right? Him and Randall, where Randall is rather like, everything's shitty. I'm going to hate everything.
Well, Randall is more, Randall is less afraid of consequence. Like Randall is, I think part of the idea of his character is in contrast to Dante, who is so terrified of consequence, he won't make a decision. Whereas Randall will do absolutely anything that comes into his mind because he doesn't care about the consequences. And neither one of those is good, but it's like they kind of like there's like a symbiosis there. I don't know.
Yeah, they're well, I was going to say they're bad for each other, but Randall is trying. Like there's the friendship arc too, which is like they work for each other.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't
in this weird way.
Yeah, I don't think I agree that they're bad for each other.
No, it's that's I think the reveal, and that's what's in Clerks 2 as well.
Yeah,
is that on the surface level they seem toxic, but they're not.
Yeah, it's like they keep each other accountable, basically.
Yeah, which the movie shows, where he's like, wrangle for me.
Yeah.
At the end.
And he just wrangles on out the door.
Yeah. I guess, any other thoughts about Clerks as a movie?
No, it still mostly works, and it's the thing that still continues to sit with me watching it is that, you know, the script does him a lot of favors for sure, but Randall's the clear star in this movie, right?
Not Brian O'Halloran, Jeff Anderson.
Yeah, like you watch the movie, he's the standout. And he never really did anything after this. Like he wasn't. It's like he wasn't interested in it or something.
I don't think he is. I think Kevin Smith. I think there's some weird stuff between them that I haven't looked into, and it's frankly none of my business.
It's none of my business. Yeah.
Yeah.
They do know each other personally before the movie.
Yeah. I think originally Kevin Smith was going to play Randall. I believe.
I believe he said that in the commentary. Yeah, that he wrote that part for himself initially.
Yeah. But Jeff Anderson's killing it. All right, this is what I was going to say. We're not going to be covering Clerks 2, I don't think.
I don't think so. Yeah, I don't think so.
Thing works. And it's probably surprising to some people that we're not pairing the two, but the pattern we're doing, I think, is going to end up working really well for some of the episodes, and then not as well for some of the others.
Yeah.
For example, spoilers, Dogma and Red State will match up. And those are two films about
religion.
Yeah. And one's way darker than the other, but they both have dark stuff to say. But the one thing I'm regretful about not having Clerks 2 is talking about them as performers, because they're definitely, this is rough around the edges. Like a lot of the dialogue feels sweaty in this one, and it's not necessarily because of the dialogue, the writing, it's because it's a very hard thing to perform. And
you have a lot of amateur actors in it.
Right, and then you get to Clerks 2, and both Brian O'Halloran and Jeff Anderson, you can tell, they really fucking learned a thing or two. Like, they're good in this film. Don't get me wrong.
They're okay. Dante is not great in this film. Like, I think Randall is the only one. Like, Randall and Jay are the only only members of the main cast who feel natural.
Even Randall at times feels like he's reading a script, though.
A little bit, a little bit.
And I don't know if this is about Kevin Smith as a director. I don't know or it's just money and time. You know, maybe it was just money and time. Mm-hmm. But Clerks 2, you can really see how they've grown. And Jeff Anderson steals the show in Clerks 2.
Yeah,
steals it, and it's wild that he didn't have a career for sure. It's wild that they both didn't. I don't think they. Yeah, I don't know what it is, because you'd think they'd at least be in a few things at first. And I know they are. He's in, Brian O'Halloran's in Vulgar.
Yeah.
Remember Vulgar?
Yeah.
The logo at the beginning of this, by the way.
Title card.
Oh, right. I totally forgot.
Title card. What the fuck is that?
Yeah, it's the View Askew
that is
clown. Vulgar the clown.
My God.
Yeah.
Start your movie off with a pedophile clown.
Yep. There was a lot, I think, after this. There was some spin-off View Askew movies. What was it? Drawing Flies? Is that the one about Sasquatch?
Yeah.
That I watched that View Askew as a studio never hit it off, I don't think.
No.
But yeah, I don't know what the story is there. I know they were local actors, and I think they continue to do stuff like that, and they must just not be interested.
Yeah, you would. I don't know.
I don't know.
Dante
odd. Brian O'Halloran is in The Happening.
He sure is.
Yeah, for one scene, you see his eyes.
Yeah.
It's very strange.
Yeah, it's an odd one. Yeah.
I know that was shot around New Jersey, so that's why. That's final thing I want to say about Clerks. When I was in my 20s, I went to the Quick Stop. I visited it.
Yeah, you did.
And, RST Video. The crazy thing about it was that when we visited, the guy was late at the video store, and we couldn't go in. And it was like, oh, perfect.
Perfect. Yeah. This is actually better for my trip.
Yeah. We also, and I have this on video somewhere, as we rolled up, 2 kids playing street hockey rolled by. It was like they set it up. It was so weird.
It was like a Disneyland ride.
Yeah. So like, I guess it's a very accurate portrayal of this one area.
Yeah.
It was very interesting. It was cool to get to see that. I went to Jay and Silent Bob's Secret Stash. I went to the funeral home and they kicked us out.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Of course it does. They were not happy about us being there. They were very patient. Yeah. Yeah, I guess. All right. So let's get into technically our next section. It's going to be quick. Let's talk about how we think this is going to match up to the Jay and Silent Bob reboot.
I think it's going to match up pretty closely. Like if he hasn't evolved he hasn't really evolved the main theme of his View Askew movies, which is just kind of, I think he's talked about like Clerks as being like his before series, like the Before Sunset series, where it's about being at a specific stage in your life where you don't know what's next.
Yes.
And it seems like that is pretty much the theme of every single movie leading up to Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. Like all the less
except for one.
Less so Dogma, yeah.
Yeah. That's the weirdest thing.
But that's part of Dogma, because she's having a crisis of faith, and that's related to this theme.
Yeah, it's just funny how Dogma is probably consider his best film is the most unlike the rest of them.
Yeah. So I think Jay and Silent Bob Reboot is going to be a similar theme of just these characters later in their lives, but still they've hit another point where they're just like, well, here we are. Things haven't really changed much. Is this going to be all there is for me? What comes next? And then you let slip that there's the additional detail of Jay has a daughter, so that's probably going to trigger a lot of these thoughts.
Yeah, well, I think the dynamic is always ambition versus friends and family.
Yeah,
where it's like you have lofty ambitions, you think you're gonna be something, or it's the opposite where you're just nihilistic because you're like happy, you're happy to not be something. You don't have to be great, and it's about finding connections with the people around you and realizing how you fit in the world.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that's definitely a big thing in Clerks too. It's one of the things I actually really liked about it. It's like it's further continuing the theme of Dante is always being told what he should be, where it's like Randall's like, well, why can't we just be what we are and be happy? Isn't this enough?
Right. It's both. Clerks 2 is tricky because it is a little bit of a bummer to know that these characters didn't evolve since Clerks.
Not really, yeah.
Yeah. But the point of it is, for spoilers for Clerks 2, they end up buying the Quick Stop and running it, and they find their place in the world.
Yeah.
They're like, it's that idea of like, yeah, just owning a business, which is still kind of a lofty goal these days. But like, yeah, they take out a loan. They buy the Quick Stop. They take control of their lives.
You remember who they take the loan from? It's Jay and Silent Bob.
Oh yeah, you're right.
Remember, they're like, well, we don't have that kind of money, and Jay's like, well, we do.
We do. Yeah, that's pretty great. But yeah, I'm excited. This is good timing because they're filming Clerks 3 right now.
Yes.
And this is, it's going to be. I assume it's going to be about the dynamic with their kids.
I don't know,
because that's where Kevin Smith is in life.
Yeah,
that's the thing. Is it all reflects Kevin Smith?
Yeah.
He made this movie in his 20s, and Clerks 2, he was 40s with a kid, and et cetera, et cetera.
His kid's in Clerks 2.
Yeah, and she's really young.
Yeah.
So he's talking about it's Clerks 2 is about kind of our place where we are right now, and I think that's Kevin Smith. He's a little bit older than us, by maybe 10 years.
About 10 years, yeah.
but that's, I think, why our generation gloms onto him, because he's always talking about being in the place in life that we're entering.
Right.
Not
yeah.
necessarily at.
There's a musician I really like named Matthew Good, and he wrote his album about high school 10 years after he graduated.
Right.
Because he said, I needed a decade to like really understand what I went through and put it into a broader context. And I think a lot of that's always stuck with me, because I think a lot of artists do that. Where it's like, I need some time to understand what this period of my life actually means to me.
Right. And yeah, Kevin Smith is no different. And so, yeah, I think you nailed it with, like I said, I don't remember too much of Jay and Silent Bob. I know it's very meta, but I think I think it's going to be another coming of age, and it's going to be dealing with the dynamics of suddenly being the authority, and what that means. What it means, it's like, I never watched the movie The Other F Word, I think it was called.
Oh, I don't know that one.
It's the F word they're referring to is father, and it's a documentary about punk rock singers and punk rock bands that are now have teenagers. Like, I know they interview, I think, Fat Mike from NoFX.
Sweet.
And it's about, I think he's a central part of it. And it's about the idea of like, oh, I guess we're the man now.
Yeah.
And how do you reconcile that? How do you deal with the fact that you're now the authority that you were saying fuck authority to? And that's, I think, what the Jay and Silent Bob reboot will be about. Another comparison is I've seen this punk band called Cocksparrer. They have they wrote all these songs in their 20s about how old people suck.
Yeah.
And they're still singing them, and they're like 60.
Yeah.
And it's very funny when they introduce a song where they're like, this one's about old people, which we are.
Yeah, I can't wait to do that. I'm gonna do a reunion with my band in like 15 years.
Yes.
And we're all old as shit. It's gonna be great.
Yeah.
I'm gonna sing all the fucking songs I wrote in my bedroom when I was 20.
Yeah. Bunch of angsty bullshit songs.
All this fucking crap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So yeah, I think Jay and Silent Bob reboot, because the Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, it's not really about, it's that closes out that era, as opposed to being about aging.
It's about him. It's about him going to Hollywood, right? Like literally.
Yeah. Yeah. It's about that.
Yeah.
Part of his life. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Are we done?
I think so. I think that's a Smith.
I think so too. I think that went really well.
Woo!
Woo! Yeah, so stay tuned for the next episode. We're going to cover the Jay and Silent Bob reboot.
Yes.
And then after that, I believe it's Mallrats and Yoga Hosers.
I have definitely not seen Yoga Hosers.
Same here. I'm so excited.
But I'll be curious. That got, again, apologies to Mr. Smith if he's listening. That got ghastly reviews. So we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see how it turned out.
I don't think we have to apologize to Kevin Smith. I think he's a very self-aware man.
Yeah, he seems to be.
Yeah. And it's, I don't know. Also, he's probably not listening.
No, he probably isn't. But the 0.0001% chance that he is. I just wanted to put that out there.
It's very funny because we don't do this with other movies we review. We don't directly address the filmmakers.
No.
So yeah, big thanks to @nerdnumbers.
Yeah, you fucking
it's an
nerd numbers.
It's an @ sign, so I assume that's a Twitter, and I'm just not gonna look into it.
Nah.
Because I'm tired.
Yeah. And listen, I'm not going to check in unless that English paper you're supposed to write for me is late.
Yeah, exactly.
You fucking nerd number.
We're going to give you a swirly.
Yeah.
Listen, folks, this was through our Patreon. And if you go to patreon.com/gamefullyunemployed, you can find all sorts of stuff, including some exclusive podcasts. For $5 a month, you can listen to Tom and Jeff Watch Batman, Fox Mulder is a Maniac, and Star Trek The Next Futurama. For a little more, you can watch movies with us every Friday night. We just closed out the Twilight movies.
It was a real struggle.
Yeah, it was.
Man, those movies are very boring.
I love them so much.
They're aggressively boring.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean...
But other times we watch awesome stuff like Passenger 57.
Exactly. It goes both ways. It's a gamble.
It truly is. You never know what you are going to get.
The point is we experience it all together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as a family.
As a family.
We also have a store. Go to gamefullyunemployed.com where you will find the link to our Teespring store. Where we have T-shirts and all kinds of other stuff. So check that out.
Tom, would you believe I'm still getting emails from TeePublic, assuming we're using them?
I would believe it, yeah, as obtuse as their customer service system is.
They're addressed to Mr. Gamefully Unemployed. It's, anyway.
Why are you Mr. Gamefully Unemployed? No, I know.
I don't know. Well, it's just because they have my email, that's all.
Yeah, that's true.
If you want me to give them your email.
No, I would prefer not to.
Okay.
I'm fine with you being Mr. Gamefully Unemployed. I want enough distance for plausible deniability.
That's fair.
In future indictments.
And there will be. There will be indictments.
There will be indictments. Eventually, this is all going to come crashing down.
Yeah. Listen, we're going to be the subject of other podcasts, all right. I guess bye.
Yeah, fucking bye.
Noise, smoking weed, doing coke, drinking beers.